Hey guys, I'm Aaron, and today I'm going to make Buckethead. So right now it's occurring to me that what I just said, making Buckethead, doesn't mean anything because right now Buckethead's not a thing. Other than this drawing I did on this post-it, he doesn't exist. What I want to make is a figure cast in plastic. So I've never done this before, so I wanted to create a figure that I thought would give me a good success in my first effort. If I don't succeed first time out, of course, I'm going to be disenchanted, disillusioned, disgusted, disappointed. So to avoid the disses, I tried to make something that I think is going to be very easy to cast with a silicone mold and then plastic casting. First thing I need to do, of course, is create a master. So I have to create the thing that I will make the mold from that I can then reproduce in plastic. So there's a couple ways I go about this. I could sculpt it in clay, which I could probably do. I'm okay at sculpting. Or I could create a model on the computer and 3D print the master. So I opted for that. So the first thing I did was I hopped into SketchUp and created a model. So here we are in SketchUp. I'll start by drawing the bucket first. So I create a circle. This is a fairly high-sided circle. I think it was 96 sides because I wanted to have it nice and smooth when I printed it out. So I created my circle first, and then I created a working plane, which is a vertical rectangle that I could draw the profile of the bucket onto. I drew everything with straight lines at first, then grabbed the two lines at the top and used move to scoot them over to give me that kind of angled side that I would see on the edge of the bucket. Once that was in there, I just used follow me to follow that shape around my original circle and get the initial shape of the bucket. I made sure that was a solid by drawing in the bottom and then made that into a group. Next, I wanted to put the little circles on the side that the handle would slot into. So I started outside of the group of the bucket. I drew a vertical line just as reference and snapped a vertical circle which I could push-pull into the side of the bucket. I did a little offset to add the inside circle. This was just basically going to be a guide for what I knew was going to be a drilled out hole later. That was also grouped and then copied to the other side. Since everything was a solid, I could actually use my solid tools and the outer shell command specifically to join those three pieces together into one solid piece. Once that was done, it was time to do the eye holes. I started by creating a sphere, again, fairly high side count. I think I stuck with that 96 sides and followed me one circle around another, and then I did some scaling to distort that into kind of a vertical eye shape to push in there. So I made a group of that. Then I went back and I cut the bucket in half. I wanted these to be symmetrical. I wanted to have the eye in the same spot on both sides, so rather than messing around with trying to line it up, I just decided to make half the bucket and then copy it to the other side as a component. So once that was in there, once that side was a solid, I used solid tools again, this time to subtract that sphere shape from the face of the bucket. Once I was done, I just copied the component, moved it over, exploded it, and regrouped it. And I had my solid of my head ready to print. Next piece was the body, of course. I started, as I normally do, with an octagon. If I don't know better, I use an 8-sided shape to do any kind of organic modeling. I knew with this particular section I was going to be using some of TomTom's tools, specifically quad face tools, vertex tools, and sub D. I'll link to all those down below if you guys have any interest in seeing those extensions for SketchUp. And I started by creating my octagon, turning it sideways and chopping it in half. The body was going to be symmetrical, so I didn't see a need to model both sides, plus this would make sure that it was symmetrical when I was done. From there, I just did some push-pulls. That was just to get something to work with, a mass to work with. And then from looking at it from one side, I used vertex tools to do some scaling. That was just to kind of give me that body shape. I spun it around to the front and did some scaling over there too. At this point, I had already made a copy of the component, so I could actually see how it looked on both sides. I wasn't modeling just half, assuming it was going to look good when it was mirrored. I actually copied the other half over so that I could see this as it came together. From there, once that shape looked good, I started to work out where the arms would go. And this was just offsetting and creating geometry that I could push-pull outside of the original body shape. Once I had that broken out approximately where it was going to go, I actually used joint push-pull from Fredo 6, I'll link to that as well, to pull that shape out all at once. When those came out, I had to make sure I did divide them. Since I'm using sub D, I had to make sure that my quads look good for the smoothing step when I get to that. And then I just used some more vertex tools. Vertex tools was a great way to just move around geometry. Once it started looking pretty good, then it was fine-tuning time. This is where I went in and I did some stuff like made some ridges to indicate where the sleeve was going to be. I did the same thing at the bottom for the shirt. What I wanted was not really super definition, not super defined or anything like that, but just kind of enough of a change in geometry there to indicate that there was, in this case, like a shirt tail or a sleeve. Again, I'm looking for that Charles Schulz peanutsy kind of thing, so I did want it to not be overly detailed. I kind of wanted a little bit soft on details. Plus, first time casting, I'm not sure how good a job I'm going to do, so I wanted to make it easy for myself. At that point, I went in and did a little bit of creasing with sub D. That's just to keep the hard edges, where the arm meets the body, where the legs meet, that sort of thing, got creased. At that point, I did bring the leg down. I worked on half the body at this point, just because I didn't want them to lap over each other and get in the way. This was a pretty easy process. I did a little bit of push-pulling, some joint push-pull, and a little bit of line cleanup here and there to make sure I kept my quads. I also started smoothing regularly, hitting the smooth tool from the sub D tool set to just see how that was going to look. It's really nice I assigned to a shortcut key so I can just tap that U key on my keyboard to toggle subdivision on and off. Great way to check as I'm running through modeling. From there, I put the neck on and copied over the component to see how that looked. I had a couple changes that had to be made here. One thing, the neck was too big, so I had to make that a little bit smaller. I cleaned up where the two cuffs of the pants met. A little messy, they overlapped each other a little bit. So I had to go in and manually clean up a little bit of geometry to seal that. I also didn't want a gap between the two legs, so I actually closed that in. So it was more of an indent rather than a hard gap there. Once I was done, I did a little bit more fine tuning with my creasing, and that was it. That actually gave me my final solid for the body print. I did do a little bit of scaling to make sure that the bucket looked good on top of the body, and then just for fun, I went in with the paint bucket tool and added some colors. At that point, I was ready to export an STL file of my two solids and take them over to the printer to get my final models printed out. I printed the body and the helmet separately and got those models done, and this right here is where I made maybe potentially a less than perfect design decision. I printed everything at a standard resolution. I probably should have gone for fine. Fine takes a little bit longer, well, about twice as long really, but when you're done, you have a lot less print lines. If you look at this one, you can actually see there is quite a bit of print lines to have to deal with. I decided that in this particular model, what I was going to try to do was use XTC. XTC is a fluid from Smooth-On. It's kind of a runny epoxy that you put on there, and it's sort of supposed to be self-leveling. So what the idea is, you brush it onto your 3D print and it fills in the gaps between the print lines. This works pretty good, and on some models works better than others. What I really should have done is I should have spent some more time sanding before I did the XTC. This could be considered thing I didn't do good number 2. I probably should have done some sanding on the raw plastic before the XTC. Give the XTC a little bit less to have to fill in. As it was, it did an okay job, but I still ended up having to do a lot of sanding afterwards because the XTC didn't fully settle in. It kind of created some bumps on the outside. Not bad, but it looked a lot better than the raw print, but probably could have gone a little smoother. So once I got that done, the XTC on there had a nice shiny Buckethead. I took those plastic body parts, the body and the head, and did some sanding. I did a lot of the sanding with a sponge, a sanding sponge. I like sanding sponges on things like this because the sanding sponge will actually bend over the organic shape, the soft shape, and just kind of work on the lines. That worked pretty well. You can also use the edge to go up against seams like where the arm meets the body. So I gave the whole thing, the bucket and the body, a good sanding, see how that would look. Looked all right. And at this point, I took it outside and gave it a coat of primer. I have to admit, I didn't record spraying because I assume you guys know what spray painting looks like. You hold a can like this and spray shoots out on the stuff. It's pretty simple. I did multiple coats of primer, doing a little light sanding between coats, just to get out any bubbles or anything that settled on the paint, anything like that, just to keep it nice and smooth. When I was done, I have what I think will make a pretty good mold. So this is Buckethead as he exists right now. Two pieces, they are separate. I did intentionally model them separately for a couple reasons. One is with his head on, I wasn't quite sure which way I would cast him because either way is going to end up creating a spot where air bubbles could settle. So I thought it would be good to cast him in two separate pieces. The other thing is, by keeping him separate, I might actually be able to position his head, move his head around when I glue him together, so he doesn't have to just be always staring straight forward. Maybe even make it a temporary connection so I can change his head on a day-to-day basis. But by the time I was done, this is what I had, and I gotta say, I'm pretty excited about this. This is cool. It's like my own custom-made little toy. I'm excited for the next step. Next video I'm gonna make, I'm gonna actually take him, dunk him in silicone and make a mold, and then pour some plastic and see how that comes out. Like I said, this design gave me a couple challenges. There were a few things that didn't work out great. One thing is I really kind of wish I got a little more definition around like the sleeves and the arms. I would probably have, had I the opportunity to do this again, or next time I make something like this, I'll probably exaggerate that seam. Between the sanding and the XTC, I kind of lost some detail around there, and I would like to get that back. The other thing, of course, like I said before, is I will print this at a fine detail and sand it before the XTC. I think that will give me a better print or a better master to take a mold from. As it is though, I'm pretty excited and I can't wait to dunk him in some silicone and make a cast of him. So that wraps up Buckethead. Hopefully you guys like that, and hopefully you come back for the next video where I actually make the mold and cast him. That should be a lot of fun, and I plan to screw it up a little bit, so swing by and see how that goes. Hopefully when it's all said and done, we have a good cast of my new friend, Buckethead. Thank you. Thank you very much for watching. To be notified of new videos as they come out, subscribe and click the bell down below. If you like this video, give me a like. If you have some other ideas for cool things that you'd like to see me make, leave a comment down below. I love interacting with you guys and hearing what you think of my videos, how I can make them better, and what else I could do. Thank you.